Good evening and welcome to PoliticIt podcast. Tonight we have Kevin Greene and Quincy Azimi-Tabrizi. Nice to have you. So let's talk a little bit about your organization, Americans for Prosperity.
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having us. Americans for Prosperity, we're a grassroots organization. What we really try to do is empower, regular folks, to educate them, to activate them, and to really fight for our freedoms. There's strength in numbers, and so we do what we can to really build that community and make a difference here in Utah and across the country.
It's very good. So what's it been like?
Oh, it's been great. We've worked on the tax cut this last year, empowering parents in education. We've had some really big wins as an organization, and it's because, everyday people, everyday Utahns are able to come together and we're stronger. We're able to make that difference and convince legislators to take action.
So, one of the things I want to talk about just a little bit, well, let's go to the history again. Where does Americans for Prosperity come from?
So the organization was started in 2005, I believe. I could be wrong. We've started here, though, in Utah in 2015. I've just been building and going strong and really making a difference here policy-wise and just growing our community.
So you worked there for quite a while before you now you're the director, right?
Yeah, so I've been with the chapter since 2018. So yeah, coming up on 5 years next month. And just a few months ago became the state director. It's been a lot of fun and we're just getting things going.
And it's grown quite a bit in the last couple of years. We have thousands of people now that are in our network, and together we're stronger.
Yeah, I noticed you even do things like phone banks.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, we try to get people, trained and involved to really make the difference. A lot of people, there's no shortage of people, right, who like to complain on social media, to be the keyboard warriors, but we really try to get people active and doing things, phone calls, door knocking, really talking to our neighbors, to our friends, to our family, and connecting them to the important issues that are going on in our country. And then really that's how you make the difference. You make the difference by talking to people, by connecting with people, and putting your passion for change into action, and that's how you get change.
That's cool. And so you'll advocate for policy and for candidates, or what do you do mostly?
Right. I mean, the majority of what we do is policy. We try to change, what we call the key institution of government. So educating people on limited government, free market principles, and so fighting for reducing regulation, for lower taxes, for really kind of reining in government to its core functions and letting us fulfill our own American dream the way that we best see fit. Then the organization also does engage in elections. We endorse candidates. We've got people out knocking on doors, making phone calls to that end to really ensure that policy champions are in place to help pass the policies that we're advocating for.
That's really cool. And one thing I noticed about your organization, though, you have a national organization, right? But you have a lot of autonomy in Utah, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, each state's different. So they let, the smallest core, bottom-up solutions, the state decides for themselves what's going to, bring the most freedom and opportunity to people.
Yeah, and I mean, and the ground game looks different, right? There's different policies that need to be passed in different states. There's different, you ride that wave of passion on, school choice. And so that's a really big thing across the country right now. In some states, we got that passed just recently. That's a further down the road fight for other states. We drive what is important here to Utahns and organize Utahns here to make sure that those things are happening.
So you'd consider yourself a more conservative group?
Yeah, I mean, we're a nonpartisan organization, but we fight for these conservative ideals: limited government, lower taxes, economic prosperity, opening up the economy that way.
Capitalism.
Yeah. And to us, it's not about the parties, right? It's about the solutions that are going to make the most difference in people's lives.
Right.
Yeah, that's cool. So the thing that I was recently involved in, we took a little trip to the border.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about what we saw down there.
Sure. Yeah, and that's with our sister organization, Americans for Prosperity Foundation. But really, we get to do a lot of cool things in our organization, in our line of work, by connecting people to the issues that are important right now. So, I mean, I think generally the border is this abstract idea when we don't live there. Really, we kind of have this idea of what it's like, but we wanted to get people on the ground. We took you and we took about a dozen other people down there to really see what's going on. And once we know what's going on, we can talk about what needs to be done to fix those issues.
Yeah, and to me, I didn't feel particularly unsafe, right, at the border when we were there. It seemed like it wasn't chaotic.
Right.
It wasn't like there was a war going on, right?
Yeah, which I think you see some videos on whichever news network you prefer, and you kind of expect that it's going to be kind of mayhem down there. But yeah, I mean, McAllen looked like any town here in Utah with palm trees.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a very, I mean, that was eye-opening in and of itself.
Right. It was interesting to me. One of the things that kind of hit me was one of the Border Patrol guys said, well, yeah, we just leave our truck out there, and when they come across the border, they just get in the back of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, our current immigration policy is so convoluted that we're basically offloading our security to the cartels down there to secure our borders for us, and that's, you know, not making the right person money. That
was fascinating to me, and when we went to the Border Patrol station, right, and when they talked about the fact that it was thousands of Chinese immigrants that were coming across the border, right?
Yeah, to me, that was one of the most shocking things. Right, abstract idea, you kind of have this perception of who's coming across, but really learning that there's been a 2,000% increase in Chinese nationals. You know, there's been I can't even remember the percentage increase in people on the terror watch list that skyrocketed in the last couple of years. So really, to me, it was a more concerning issue than I think I'd originally thought it was. I don't know what you thought about that.
Yeah, well, we met some of those families, right?
Yeah.
We met families from China, from Haiti, from Venezuela, and it's not just, you know, everybody coming up from Mexico like some of us.
And it was families with kids.
Yeah.
Right. And what struck me about the Chinese is I think almost everyone I talked to, it was like close to $30,000, $25,000 to $30,000 for them to actually come across the border.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, they spend their life savings, they give up their entire life there. You know, the family that we talked to at Catholic Charities, you know, mentioned the COVID lockdowns, which, I mean, I think here in our country were far too strict. You know, they were sealing people in their apartment buildings, not letting them leave, and that was finally the straw, right? Realizing how terrible it might be in some places where it's finally worth it to make that trek, right? That's not I'm gonna, you know, walk a few miles across the border in Mexico. You know, they fly into Central America, and it's, you know, thousands of miles through the jungle to really, you know, wrap your head around how bad something must be. You know, we see how terrible it is on the news, but to be living that and then to make that choice for your family is really, I mean, the Chinese family was a very powerful story to hear.
Part of it was inspiring, right?
Yeah.
No, like, you can still live the American dream. That's still alive. But then another part of it was you're spending $30,000 to $50,000 to get here. Some of that's transportation costs, but a lot of that is paying off the cartels to be able to come through.
Yeah. I want to talk about that when we come back. Let's take a break, though.
Awesome.
Enormous migrant caravan, Title 42, set to expire on Thursday.
At dawn, the migrants covered in blankets stretch for blocks.
The policies that we have right now are encouraging people to come here to this country illegally.
The border is approximately 2,000 miles long, about 19,000 officers, and that is not enough to deal with the influx of people coming in.
I think it's very important for activists and for communities and people in general to get an opportunity to come to the border and see what's really happening here.
Very broadly, I saw things I didn't expect.
It's a mess. I mean, it's a humanitarian disaster.
In my 20 years, we pulled out 12 bodies out of this channel. That's the reason that grid is there. That is to catch the bodies so they don't get sucked up in our pumps.
And I know that not everyone will agree, but let's try to figure it out, and this can be something where we come together. It doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat, and like we've said, this is an American issue.
Welcome back to PoliticIt. We're talking to Quincy and Kevin from AFP here in Utah, so Americans for Prosperity. Now, before we broke, we just started talking about the Chinese nationals that were coming across. we actually got to talk to them, a couple of different families when we went to Catholic Charities. So what happens is they come across the border, they go to the Border Patrol station, right? And then they're basically taken over to Catholic Charities. Is that?
Yeah, so I mean, most people coming across that end up there are claiming asylum. They're being persecuted for some reason in their home country, and then that's where they go. They get all their paperwork, and then they've got a 4 or 5 year wait for a court date. But yeah, that's the process. They come across and they almost want to get caught, right? Because then they know that that's where the process starts, and then that's how they can keep it going.
And that's why when the Border Patrol agent said that sometimes these people just climb in the back of the truck.
Yeah.
They're obviously educated on that's the safest way for them to go, right?
Yeah.
So it's much better for them to actually be processed once they get to the border, right?
Yep.
And then they're immediately taken over to Catholic Charities, and a lot of those people got plane tickets at that point too, didn't they? To go stay with family or wherever they're going.
Right, and then awaiting their court date 4 or 5 years down the road.
So when we were visiting with the Chinese nationals, kind of interesting the story of how they end up getting clear to the border, right? Because most of them, it seemed like they were flying into Panama.
Yeah.
And then catching it from there. So there must be something with Panama where a Chinese national can actually go to Panama without any sort of visa or anything, or maybe it's a lot easier to get them. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that, and I don't know that they shared that portion of the story with us. But I think what is really striking is how much money they're willing to spend, and then you kind of extrapolate that to how many people are being helped by the cartel to cross our borders, and you just kind of think about how much money that adds up to, every year for the cartels. And to me, that was a really shocking thing.
Yeah, they said that the cartels made more from just getting people across the border than they did. They theorized from drugs and human trafficking. Although you might consider
that is human trafficking, right?
But so we heard from the Chinese nationalists, they came through, right? But when the cartels let people through, they're going to coach them a little bit. Like, this is how you claim asylum. You have to be discriminated against in one of these 5 classes. And so a lot of people claim religion. Some people will claim like a race or ethnicity or however, the story lines up. And of course, there's a lot of really valid ones that you can prove.
Yeah.
But 4 to 5 years is a really long process to be able to weed out the truth.
Well, and what's interesting to me, one of the things they said was, you may be from Venezuela and your government's a bunch of communists and you want to get out of there, but that's not a valid reason for asylum, is it?
Yeah.
Right.
You have to have some special classification that makes them vulnerable to persecution from the government, right?
Yeah, religious, gender, things like that we would normally think of as protected classes.
So it's interesting with the Chinese. All of the families that I visited with all said they were Christians, and they had to get out of China, right, because of the persecution they faced.
It was funny. Even they said family members were Christians, and that was enough to get them persecuted in their own country.
Yeah.
I think, to hit on your point though, the cartel is the one guiding you across the border. You're not getting across the border without the cartel. And so, everybody coming across is paying them something, whether it's, you're a drug mule for them or you're paying them $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. And we've really offloaded, like you mentioned earlier, the security of our country to a criminal syndicate in a foreign country. They live here in our country. We were with former Congresswoman Mayra Flores at the border, and in her neighborhood in McAllen, there were cartel members. They would disappear in the middle of the night to avoid raids that they knew were coming. But really, I think it's a failure of our government from both parties for many years. This political football, we refused to do anything about it, and now that they've kind of taken over our southern border.
Yeah, and one of the things you said that I thought was a really important point is you don't get across the border if the cartel doesn't approve of it.
Yeah.
And these people are more afraid of the cartel than they are our border patrol or any of our laws, right?
Well, and we visited that location, along the river, the water district. And if you're not paying the cartel, you are almost guaranteed to not make it across that border alive. They had to build a grate on the river there on the intake system to prevent, there's been a dozen bodies over the last decade or so that flowed into that, the water system, and they had to build that to protect it. And the owner of that property mentioned none of these were drownings. So these were not people who, simply got caught up in the tide or in the flow of the river. It was, you didn't pay the cartel, and the cartel
killed you,
does not allow you to cross. I mean, and they told us they were watching us the whole time. Every quarter of a mile along that border, they have, cartel members stationed, and they knew we were there. They were watching us. We couldn't see them, but I think it's a very scary thought to think that we've let them basically control the security at our southern border.
Yeah, and charge people to get in.
Yep.
That's what just seems so odd, right?
Right.
What are we doing? And these people take a great journey too. They could starve on the way, right? I mean, there's a lot of things that can happen to them.
Yeah. And that's I think if you really think about the humanitarian aspect of it, that's really striking as well, because I think it's easy to villainize people that are, it's just, an illegal immigrant is crossing over and breaking our laws. I think our laws are very confusing. I think depending on who's in power in our country, we send very confusing mixed signals about what our immigration policy is. And then the cartel uses that to convince people that they're going to get them across.
When people say that it's too hard, the cartels certainly tell them what the rules are. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the most striking thing to me, that the cartels really did control that border.
Yeah.
And making, I bet they make more money off of that than they do off drugs.
It's a multi-billion-dollar industry,
And people, so they'll send people over the border. They'll try, maybe they get turned away. They'll try again, they get turned away. And if they said the third time, if they don't get across, and the cartel's like, all right, we'll send you again, but this time, like, you're taking drugs or children. Like, you're certainly beholden to them to be able to get across.
Yeah, it amazed me with those Chinese nationals paying up to $50,000.
A lot of money.
Right? I mean, you would have thought, if we're really concerned about people who are being persecuted in their countries, why don't we have something at our embassies that basically gives them a passport so they can get on a plane and come here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, and to that end, there are certain reforms, right, that have to happen. We have to make the process easier to understand and something that people want to follow the rules. I think most people want to follow the rules so that they're not constantly living in fear of them being, caught or figured out and then sent back to their country. But we've created this system, right? Like I said, it's this political football, and it becomes an election talking point every 2 or 4 years for each party, to then never really solve the crisis, because right, you can promise the next time I'm going to fix this the next time, but right, I think people really do want to come here legally, and we have to figure out, right, we want good people who want to come here and work hard and contribute to our society, and then what we also want is then Border Patrol to be able to focus on the people who we don't want here, like the 200% increase in people from the terror watch list. I want Border Patrol spending all of their time focused on preventing those people from getting here, rather than on the humanitarian crisis from people, being dehydrated out in the desert and having to rescue them that way.
Yeah, and Kevin, you're absolutely right that the humanitarian crisis is the right phrase for it, because we were talking to the border agents while we were visiting the security facility, and they were saying that 80 to 90% of their time was spent on humanitarian efforts, like making sure these people don't die when,
right.
We need to be securing our borders, right?
Well, I appreciate you coming.
Yeah,
we're out of time, but so it'd be nice. How can people find out more about this?
So you can go to americansforprosperity.org, or on our social media platforms. We share all of our events. We share what we're doing. Facebook, search Americans for Prosperity Utah, Instagram, Americans for Prosperity Utah, and connect with us there.
Yeah, it'd be good to get people involved with you.
Yeah.
We'd love to have you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
We'll see you guys next week.